Joe Biden not doing the Super Bowl interview for CBS. And you can say, oh, that's not a big deal. But I think we should wrap this conversation into some polling I saw from the NBC News poll. I'll read you two of these. Having the necessary mental and physical health to be president, Biden is down 23 points to Trump. Being competent and effective, Biden is down 16 points to Trump. So you might say, okay, not doing an interview for the Super Bowl is no big deal. I actually disagree with that because for Biden to prove that he can do this job, he has to show up and do these interviews and do debates and show people that he's not this kind of babbling old man. Don't you think?
I do. I mean, it's his biggest liability. I don't think there's any question about that. And what's interesting about that poll you cited is both of those numbers in 2020, when we had the same matchup, Biden beat Trump in both of those. And in terms of the one that involved incompetent and effective, he was 9 points ahead in that same polling. So this is a reversal. And to me, that makes sense because I never bought the Biden has dementia. He's completely out of it. He's a puppet essentially being controlled by people behind the scenes. I never bought that. I still don't buy that. But what I do buy is he is not the same guy that he was in 2020. I saw some video the other day of him campaigning in 2020 and then a little bit of video from early in 2021 after he had won. And it's a stark difference. So for a long time, I was one of those people who was like, come on, you're being too hard on the guy. Yes, he's not what he was at 50. Of course not. He's 80 years old, 81 years old, right? Nobody is. But I didn't think the decline, I thought he still was effective enough. I didn't think the decline was severe. But I have to admit, in the last year or so, last 6 months, I think you're really starting to see it. And he had that remark the other day where in Las Vegas, he was doing a campaign event and he was talking about the French prime minister who now is Emmanuel Macron, but he confused him with another guy who was the French prime minister in the 90s who's been dead for 30 years. And look, if you're going to go after Trump when he got Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi confused in a long attack on, he meant Pelosi, but he was using Haley. If you're going to criticize Trump on that, which I think is fair, you also should, look at what Biden did in that regard. And with Trump, it doesn't happen as often. Trump's also pushing 80, so he's not the same guy he was, I don't think, in 2020 or certainly in the years prior to that. But it's really starting to catch up with Biden. You see it in the way he moves. And to be fair to him, a lot of times people take little snippets out of speeches or press conferences and use those and be like, look, he's lost it. He's completely gone. And that's not the case. But there's no question the guy is not what he was even in 2020. And that's the problem when politicians get into their 80s is you age quickly. There's not much difference between a guy who's 60 and 65, right? Unless they have some type of major health crisis in between. They're going to be pretty much the same physically and mentally. But between 75 and 80 or 80 and 85, the decline can happen quick. And you're right. How do you counteract that? Assuming Biden is going to be the candidate, which it looks more and more like he is, you counteract it by going out there and showing up and to showing people, yeah, you're okay. You're not what you were when you were 60. Nobody expects that, but you're fine. You're within the range of I feel okay that this guy's there mentally. And the State of the Union's coming up. That's going to be a big deal. The campaign, the convention, maybe debates, those will all be big. But in the meantime, you have an opportunity to sit in front of the biggest audience you'll probably have, a Super Bowl audience, and you won't take that opportunity. To me, that is a really, really bad sign for how the Biden people feel about their candidate. He hasn't done many interviews recently. He hasn't done many press conferences recently. He does talk to the media here or there. He does do campaign events. So it's not like he's hiding in the basement of the White House. But there's a difference between a rally, a campaign event, and an interview, right? And we need to see him do some back and forth interviews. And I think that would help alleviate maybe some people's concerns. And the fact that he won't do this one with a potential huge audience, man, that is really concerning, I think, if you're a Biden supporter.
Yeah, to me, it only feeds that narrative that he is hiding in the basement, which I think you could get away with that a little more during COVID. And you could say this is because of COVID. We're trying to be safe and all that. I agree with you. And so people might be either watching this show right now on YouTube or listening on podcast. But I'm telling you, I don't know if you've seen this on YouTube. I I'm kind of on YouTube so much because it's a essentially my full-time job. I see so many YouTube ads. I don't know if you've seen the one where it's Barack Obama with Joe Biden, and they're standing there and they're just trying to get donations. Hey, chip in. And Eric, this is the most taped. I mean, you and I have done TV and radio and all that. It's the most, I mean, simple and easy, probably 30-second or maybe it's 15-second, whatever it is. I'm sure there's a couple different versions. And Obama says a sentence or two, Biden says maybe a sentence, Obama, it goes back and forth. And I'm telling you, in this little even tape setting, he just looks so old. I mean, he's whispering. It doesn't look confident. And again, if there's ever a scenario where you can make it easy for a guy to just ping pong a couple lines off of Obama, he doesn't even look good to me in these super produced and recorded 30-second ads where he's trying to get donations.
It's the eyeball test, and people see it and they know it. And look, is that the most important job of the presidency? No, the most important job of the presidency happens in things we can't see. It's in the situation room. It's in the Oval Office. It's on phone calls with your staff, with cabinet secretaries, with foreign leaders. When you have time to think things through and you're not under the spotlight and you're getting advice from people. In that regard, I think, Joe Biden at this moment is probably okay. But that's not the entire job of the presidency. Part of it is getting out there and doing interviews and selling yourself and your candidacy and your policies and convincing the American people to be mobilized behind your agenda. That's part of the job. And right now, he is not able to effectively do that. And part of the problem is presidential terms are 4 years. And as I said, the decline when you get older can happen very, very quickly. So he would be 86 years old by the end of his second term. And I mean, it's his biggest. We talked about this before. As the economy gets better, as inflation recedes, the stock market improves, the job market looks great. We had another blowout jobs report the other day. If that trend continues, it's a big if, that's going to be less of an issue for him. And more, what it's going to be is immigration, which we'll talk about that later, and his age. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to do anything about immigration because it doesn't look like any bills are going to pass, and he doesn't seem intent to crack down on the border. So it's going to be his age, and that's not going to get better. And the only way to counteract that is what we were saying: get out there and show people I'm fine. And yes, speeches are great. And the State of the Union, he did really well last year at the State of the Union. He'll probably do okay again this year. That's coming up in March. But that's not the same thing as being in front of a person asking you questions and having to go back and forth. And he has to display, again, the expectations are pretty low. That's the good news for him. But he has to display a base level competency there, or it's going to be a major problem. And look, Trump's so unpopular, he could still win anyway. He could still win anyway. But he has to he and his people have to try to help himself. And I think there comes a point where when we get into the summer, a final decision needs to be made. And he and Obama and his advisors and the grand poobahs of the Democratic Party, they need to come together and be like, look, are you up to this? And can you do this for the stretch run? And a lot of that is going to depend on the polling at that moment, Trump's legal status. Is there a viable person who could step up if needed? But I think, and again, I want to be clear, I think Biden is going to be the nominee. I think Biden will be there. And I think Biden has a pretty good chance to win at least 50-50, I think, despite all of these problems we're mentioning. But I think that is the moment at the convention, the weeks leading up to the convention, Biden himself and everyone around him is going to have to make a final decision. Are you really up for this? Are you really up for being out there pushing for, and because surrogates can help, the vice president can help, Gavin Newsom can help, Obama himself can help, money, he's going to have a ton of money. That's not going to be a problem. But there's certain things that only a candidate can do and arguments that only the candidate can make.
And getting back to the sports analogy, though, I think sometimes a coach or a manager, you have to save somebody from themselves, right? A starting pitcher, even though the starting pitcher wants to stay in, sometimes you got to pull them. I wonder if even if Joe Biden says, "Yeah, I'm up for this," someone needs to go, "Hey, Joe, maybe you're not." But again, I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll have time to talk about that. So clearly, we're going to talk a ton about immigration in this bill. But let's finish up just because there's some immigration pieces in this NBC News polling. But I want to read off some of these to you and just get your take. I already told you and everybody about the let's see, being competent and effective, where Biden's down 16, having the necessary mental and physical health to be president, he's down 23, securing the border and controlling immigration, Biden is down 35. That's the biggest. Dealing with the economy, Biden's down 22. Dealing with crime and violence, Biden's down 21. Improving America's standing in the world, so the foreign policy type piece, he's down 11. So the only questions that Biden is up, he's up 17 on treating immigrants humanely and protecting immigrant rights. Dealing with the issue of abortion plus 12. Here's the one I find funny, or maybe it's not so funny, but protecting democracy, Biden's only up 2. So here we are. If you're in the middle and you truly believe, I think a lot of people in the middle believe that Donald Trump tried to overturn the election, you would think maybe that's one of Biden's biggest strengths. He's only up plus 2, which probably speaks to the point that hey, a lot of Republicans and a lot of Trumpers believe that hey, what Biden did with the Hunter Biden laptop story, with the FBI, with big tech, and we had this conversation a couple weeks ago. I agree with you. I don't think it's the same, but it seems like from a political standpoint, if Joe Biden's only up 2 points on protecting democracy, people don't look at it as that much of a big deal as maybe you and I and some others.
And I think a lot of it is this polling now, as we become so polarized, more and more those individual questions reflect who do I like? And you see this with the economy. As the economy has gotten way better, Democrats and independents have increased, if you look at polling, their support of Biden on the economy as the numbers have gotten better. Republicans really haven't. And that just shows you that some of this is not about the issue or the data. Some of this is about whether you like the guy or not. Or and the age thing is part of that with Biden. Part of that is whether you think he's competent or not. Part of it is the rehabilitation that the conservative media, some parts of it have done on the rewriting of history, shall we say, on the kind of post-election period. Polling at this point, I take with a giant grain of salt when you get into some of these crosstabs because they can vary widely because the samples are so small in different I mean, you could, for instance, you could ask some of these same questions and you get dramatically different results from poll to poll. But in general, there's no question that it's not looking good for Biden in a lot of these individual crosstabs. The question is, will it get better? Will it get better as things go on? And I think I've mentioned this before. The blinking red light of danger for Trump is the question that you see in pretty much every poll of if he is convicted of a crime, particularly related to the post-election period, January 6th, trying to steal the election, will you vote for him? All the polling I've seen on that is Biden wins. And that includes in polls where Trump is ahead before you ask that question. It flips to Biden. And that to me, and that's why Trump and his team, we'll talk about this later, are doing everything they can to push these trials until after the election. Because part of it is Trump doesn't want to go to prison, right? Of course. But part of it is political. They know that if this trial comes out and people are reminded every day for weeks of the absolutely outrageous conduct of Trump after the election, and then he's convicted, again, could he win despite that? Sure. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough.